Viryam karavavahai tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. We'll welcome everyone to our first class on the Bhagavad Gita for this. We're going to begin the Gita this evening. Swami Prabhavananda's translation and commentary. For those of you who don't have the book and want to follow along, it's Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, as translated and commented on by Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood. That's our text. We're going to start this evening not with the Gita itself, because there's two things that need to be read first before we go into the Gita. The first is something called the cosmology of the Gita, which is at the back of the book. It's an appendix, and it's to give us an understanding of just exactly what it says, the cosmology of the Gita. If we finish that before the end of the class, then we'll take up Aldous Huxley's introduction, which is a lengthy and very inspired commentary on what the Swami did and on the Gita itself. So before we begin, are there any comments or questions from anyone? All right, dear. The thing to do, Swayam, is just start with the appendix, the cosmology of the Gita, and if you would read slowly and make sure that everything is clearly understood as we go along. As I say, the Swami explains why he felt it was necessary to include this. So with that, please, Swayam, begin.
Okay. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.
Happy New Year to everybody, whoever didn't come yesterday. And of course, who came also. The cosmology of the Gita. Like all other works of Hindu religious literature, the Gita is based upon a clearly defined system of cosmology. The single central fact of this cosmology is called Brahman, the reality. Brahman is the total Godhead. It can never be defined or expressed. The Upanishads say that Brahman is existence, knowledge, and bliss. But these are not attributes. Brahman cannot be said to exist. Brahman is existence itself. Brahman is not wise or happy, but absolute knowledge, absolute joy. Another method of approach, more acceptable perhaps to our human minds, is to say Brahman is not this, Brahman is not that. Until the entire phenomenal universe has been eliminated and Brahman alone remains. Being absolutely present, Brahman is within all creatures and objects. The Godhead is present in man, in the mouse, in the stone, in the flash of lightning. Thus considered, Brahman is called the Atman, a term of convenience merely, which does not imply the slightest difference. The Atman and Brahman are one. Again, when Brahman is considered in relation to this universe, he is regarded as a personal God, Ishvara. Ishvara is God with attributes. He contains all the divine qualities of love, mercy, purity, justice, knowledge, and truth. Brahman, being absolute, is beyond all action. Therefore, Brahman cannot be said to create or to destroy. It is Ishvara, Brahman united with his power, who creates this universe, preserves it, and dissolves it. To say this is not necessarily to imply a dualism. Brahman's power can no more be separated from Brahman than the heat of fire can be separated from the fire itself. But philosophical analysis cannot take us any further into this tremendous mystery. The conception of Ishvara represents all that the human intellect can know of God. Brahman, in the absolute sense, cannot possibly be known by conscious mind. Brahman can only be experienced in that superconscious state achieved by the saints, which is called samadhi or union with God. The methods of reaching this state are described at length in the Bhagavad Gita. When all sense contact with the outer world has been broken by means of discrimination, spiritual discipline, and meditation, the mind is able to turn inward upon itself and realize the presence of the Atman, the immanent Godhead. This is the technique of all mystical practice, and it has been taught by every true religion.
Okay, let's pause right there. All of it has been said. Any comments from your own wisdom or experience? Any concern that you might need to have resolved, or any question you would like to ask?
I do have a question, Brother Shankara.
Yes, please, dear.
It says Ishvara is God with attributes. He contains all the divine qualities, and it names all the divine qualities. So does that exclude the non-divine qualities that we possess as humans for Ishvara?
Brahman contains everything. Ishvara is a special manifestation of Brahman. And so the aspects of duality that appear to us as these non-divine aspects you mentioned, they are part of the duality. When seen in its unity, in that superconscious state, there is no such thing as good or evil. There is no duality. There is no manifestation. Manifestation is, as we'll understand as we read on, a product of the power of Brahman to express itself. And as Swami Sarvapriyananda remarked, when he was asked why would Brahman do this, his answer was simply because it can. There's no way for us to understand. So Ishvara is a special manifestation of the power of Brahman. It's also known as Shakti, also known as Maya. This power of manifestation. Within Maya, there are good and bad attributes, but within the Godhead as expressed as Ishvara, there are only the divine or noble attributes.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
No, that's clear. Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
Okay, the Atman and Brahman are one. What is the difference between Atman and Brahman?
It as the Swami said, there is no difference. When we speak of the Brahman as it seems to appear in these individuated separate beings, the human being, the mouse, the stone, then we say, for a matter of convenience, he says, just as a matter of convenience, that is Atman. The
Okay.
Atman exists within us, but it's no difference whatsoever. It's just a way of speaking about it that is found in the scriptures, so that it can be spoken of as it appears, or seems to appear in individuated living and non-living beings.
And that's also the eternal Godhead, correct?
Yes, that's right. And but when we say eternal and words like that, we really don't know what we mean. But we say them because we need to have some sense. But it's only in Ishvara that we get any sense of what God really is. Vivekananda says it is the highest conception that the human mind can hold. The left mind, and for that matter, the left and right minds together, cannot hold anything beyond that. We witness, when we have achieved samadhi, as he says, as the Swami says, when we have achieved samadhi, then there is this grasp of that. But the thing about samadhi is, the kind of samadhi that the Swami is talking about, there is no experiencer there. There is no mind. The mind has been left behind, and we'll see very full explanations of this in the Gita, and we'll see some more understanding of how mind comes to be as we continue our reading of this cosmology of the Gita. Thank you, Brahmadas. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, Brother Shankara, I do want to summarize the answer you gave to my question, make sure that I've grasped it correctly. So when this individual, as Swayam, is able to, with spiritual practice and grace, unite completely with the special manifestation of Brahman as Ishvara, then this will also reflect only divine qualities.
Yes. This is what is meant by purifying oneself to the point where, but through spiritual practice, purifying oneself to where only the noble qualities are left. As Sri Ramakrishna says, you become like an expert dancer that cannot put a foot wrong. You become like the expert singer that cannot sing a wrong note. And yet, he says, because of the capacity of the human mind, he says, even the most skilled singer cannot keep her voice always on the highest note. So we return from the witness awareness to our ordinary consciousness. And so when we experience Ishvara in the fullest sense, having purified ourselves through spiritual practice, we have what is called savikalpa samadhi. There are still attributes. There's still a sense of, I am experiencing this pure and completely unified divine being, but somehow I seem to be still separate because I am experiencing it. We'll get very full explanations of all these things as we proceed, first with this cosmology, then Huxley's introduction, and then the Gita itself.
Shall I continue?
Please do, dear.
Okay.
Unless there's something, anyone else has anything. All right, please go ahead.
Hinduism has further personified the three functions or aspects of Ishvara as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma represents the divine function of creation, Vishnu of preservation, and Shiva, dissolution. Shiva is often spoken of as the destroyer, but this is a misleading word because the universe is never destroyed. Since it is subject to the eternal power of Brahman, the universe is part of a beginningless and endless process, which alternates between the two phases of potentiality and expression. When at the end of a time cycle or kalpa, the universe is dissolved, it passes into a phase of potentiality, a seed state, and thus awaits its next creation.
And this, by the way, hang on for just one moment. This insight was come to scientifically. It was the last thing that he was working on before he died, by the physicist Stephen Hawking. He said that the universe would eventually be dissolved into black holes. The black holes, the emanation from black holes was not a thing at all, but it was a kind of potentiality. So it's this was, and physicists are continuing to, physicists and astrophysicists are continuing to wrestle with this idea, and they are very satisfied that Hawking was really onto something. So would you read that statement again so that we can see it in that context?
Sure. When at the end of a time cycle or kalpa, the universe is dissolved, it passes into a phase of potentiality, a seed state, and thus awaits its next creation. In chapter 8 of the Gita, this process is described. The phase of expression is called by Sri Krishna the day of Brahma, and the phase of potentiality the night of Brahma. The creatures inhabiting the worlds subject to these cycles are perpetually being reborn and redissolved, with each succeeding cosmic day and night. This dissolution should not, however, be thought of as going back to God. The creature merely returns to the power of Brahman, which sent it forth, and remains there in an unmanifested state until the time comes for its remanifestation. The power of Brahman is the basis of all mind and matter. It is called Prakriti or Maya. The terms are interchangeable. According to Gita, Ishvara makes himself a body out of Prakriti whenever he chooses to be born among men. Nevertheless, because he is God, he remains master of Prakriti even in his human form. It is in this that the divine incarnation differs from the ordinary mortal. Man also is the Atman associated with Prakriti or Maya, but man is subject to Prakriti and deluded by it into thinking that he is not the Atman. To become united with the Atman is to throw off this delusion and to win liberation from the process of birth and death. The liberated man cannot be reborn because he is no longer subject to the power of Prakriti. The divine incarnation is never subject to this power. He enters the universe and leaves it at will. Hinduism accepts the belief in many divine incarnations, including Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, and foresees that there will be many more. In every age I come back to deliver the holy, to destroy the sin of the sinner, to establish righteousness.
To destroy the sin of the sinner is to remove our karma. This is why we become free, because we no longer are subject to the karma. So this is what is meant by that. So please read that statement again. This is a statement by Sri Krishna in the Gita.
Hinduism accepts belief in many divine incarnations, including Krishna, Buddha, and Jesus, and foresees that there will be many more. In every age I come back.
This is the quote. In every age
I come back to deliver the holy, to destroy the sin of the sinner, to establish righteousness. Prakriti is said to be composed of three factors known as the gunas. They are sattva, rajas, and tamas. During the night of Brahma, the phase of potentiality, these gunas are in a state of perfect equilibrium and Prakriti remains undifferentiated. Creation is the disturbance of this equilibrium. The gunas then begin to enter into a vast variety of combinations, corresponding to the various forms of differentiated mind and matter. Their characteristics may be known from their products in the psychic and physical worlds. In the physical world, Sattva embodies all that is pure and fine. Rajas embodies the active principle, and Tamas the principle of solidity and resistance. All three are present in everything, but one guna always predominates. For example, Sattva predominates in sunlight, Rajas in an erupting volcano, and Tamas in a block of granite. The gunas also represent the different stages in the evolution of any particular entity. Sattva is the essence of the form to be realized. Tamas is the inherent obstacle to its realization, and Rajas is the power by which that obstacle is removed and the essential form becomes manifest. In the mind of man, Sattva expresses itself psychologically as tranquility, purity, and calmness. Rajas as passion, restlessness, aggressive activity, and Tamas as stupidity, laziness, and inertia. Sometimes one guna is predominant, sometimes another, and a man's mood and character vary accordingly. But a man can cultivate any one of the gunas by his actions and thoughts and way of living. We are taught that tamas can be overcome by the cultivation of rajas and rajas by the cultivation of sattva. However, the ultimate ideal is to transcend sattva also and reach the Atman, which is above and beyond the gunas. In tracing the evolution of differentiated matter from Prakriti, we begin with Mahat, the basis of the individual intelligence. Next comes Buddhi, the faculty by which objects are distinguished and classified. Then Ahamkara, the ego sense. Ahamkara divides itself into three functions. Manas, which receives impressions from the senses and carries them to Buddhi. 2. The five organs of perception: sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch, and the five organs of action: tongue, feet, hands, and the organs of evacuation and reproduction. And thirdly, the five tanmatras, the essences of sound, touch, aspect, taste, and smell. These subtle tanmatras, combining and recombining, produce the five gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, of which the external universe is composed. The whole system may be shown diagrammatically as seen below, and there is a diagram which only those with the book will be able to see.
Yeah, it shows Prakriti, and from Prakriti comes Mahat, the great cause. So this it gives rise to what in us is called the causal body. It doesn't. It's not our causal body. It is the causal body, and then buddhi, and ahamkara. There are only one mahat, or great cause. There's only one. These are the first three of the 24 cosmic principles. Mahat, the great cause. Buddhi, the ability to discriminate that there is something here. And then the sense, this ego sense of, oh, I am grasping this, I am seeing this. But there's only one of each of those. It then somehow, and somehow is the only thing that can be said, because it can, it expresses itself as the other 21 cosmic principles, which Swayam just listed. The mind, manas, the five subtle elements, the five gross elements, the five senses, and their in their subtle and gross form. Any comments or questions from anyone about any of that?
So I'm looking at this diagram here,
Yes.
and so it's ahamkara that sort of splits into all these, the organs of perception, action, manas, then tanmatras, and the gross elements.
Yes, and through the power of the gunas. It is the power of the gunas and their endless combinations that create the infinite and universe, that there is no limit to the potential of universe to manifest. It does it through the power of the gunas. So you might want to read that list again, starting with the Mahat.
Yeah. But before that, I have one more question.
Yes, dear.
So the five tanmatras, which then become into the five, the gross elements, earth,
Mhm.
water, fire, air, and ether.
Mhm.
So I guess when you back up into it, then these gross elements, because the body is, when they say organs of perception and action, that is also these gross elements, right?
Yes, but they all have their subtle essence. Anyone who studies the body as a physician does, as you did, knows that there is a great deal of subtlety going on behind the apparent manifestation. And these subtle essences are what are, uh, this is what's meant by the tanmatras, the subtle essences. They give rise to the manifestation of the gross elements, the gross aspects of the body. We have a subtle body, which is made of this manas and buddhi and ahamkara, or the mind, and and that's what transmigrates. That's what becomes reborn. We'll learn all about this as we study the Gita. Krishna explains it in great detail.
Okay. So I'm going back to the previous page to get all of that again.
Mm-hmm.
In tracing the evolution of differentiated matter from Prakriti, we begin with Mahat, the basis of the individual intelligence. Next comes Buddhi, the faculty by which objects are distinguished and classified. Then Ahamkara, the ego sense. Ahamkara divides itself into three functions: manas, which receives the impression from the senses and carries them to the buddhi; 2, the five organs of perception: sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch; and five organs of action: tongue, feet, hands, and the organs of evacuation and reproduction; and thirdly, the five tanmatras, the essences of sound, touch, aspect, taste, and smell. These subtle tanmatras, combining and recombining, produce the five gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, of which the external universe is composed.
Okay, any other comment or question before we move on from that? Because this is the cosmology that is being described. All of this has been leading up to this description of what is known as Sankhya philosophy, the Sankhya formulation of how manifestation is.
Is ether the same as space?
Roughly speaking, yes. I mean, there is really no English translation for ether, and I mean, ether is the closest it comes, but what the Sanskrit is untranslatable in its pure sense. But it's just close enough for us, you know. We can grasp what's being meant. Yes, ether is the space between things. This is why our closing prayer on Sundays is, let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the ether.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, if there's nothing else from anyone. All right, dears, please go ahead.
We must beware of trying to force the hypothesis of modern Western science into the frame of the Hindu world picture. Yet, certain points of agreement exist between them and should not be disregarded. Modern science has, of course, no concern with the concept of absolute reality. It does not seek to know Brahman, nor does it offer confirmation of the validity of the mystic's claim to superconsciousness. It says, in effect, for the present at any rate, we have no technique for investigating this type of experience. When you speak of knowing Brahman, you are speaking in extra scientific terms. Nevertheless, if we consider Prakriti and the Gunas, we find that science and Vedanta are talking the same language. Science also postulates a monistic universe. All matter is made up of different combinations of the chemical elements, and these elements are composed of combinations of identical units. Man is all of a piece with this world and with the most distance of the stars. I'll just read that last sentence again.
Please.
Man is all of a piece with this world and with the most distant of the stars. Science makes no basic distinction between mind and matter. Mind is everywhere potential. If the scientist cannot yet detect mind in a stone, he believes that This is only because he lacks a suitable method of doing so. He finds no point in evolution at which life can be said to enter, no point at which personality suddenly invests the fetus or the growing infant. Evolution, he tells us, is perfectly continuous and it has a general direction. Man's ideals and values are relative, perpetually evolving. The goal is not known, but its direction is apparent, and it is man's evolutionary mission to move continually toward it, as Columbus sailed toward the unknown West. From a scientific point of view, man's mission is to acquire greater and greater knowledge of his relation to his environment and to gain increasing control over it, since it is really a part of himself. And so Arjuna and the scientist are both asking the same question: what am I? That's the cosmology section.
Would you repeat that last, please, before you go on?
Sure. Man's ideals and values are relative, perpetually evolving. The goal is not known, but its direction is apparent. And it is man's evolutionary mission to move continually toward it, as Columbus sailed toward the unknown West. From a scientific point of view, man's mission is to acquire greater and greater knowledge of his relation to his environment and to gain increasing control over it, since it is really a part of himself. And so Arjuna and the scientist are both asking the same question: what am I?
Have you reached the end?
Mhm.
Okay. Any further comments or questions from anyone? So this is the question that the Gita will answer for us. What am I? Krishna goes to very great and loving lengths to try to give our left mind some grasp and some scope for our right mind or heart through teaching us meditation, through teaching us how to see ourselves as something other than the doer. He says this is our fundamental delusion, that you are the doer, that God alone does everything, God alone is real, God alone does everything. And so we get some grasp of how to free ourselves from our karmas. He says, I've come back to save the sinner from his sins. And he explains in some detail, particularly in the Karma Yoga section, just exactly what you can do to be free from karma. That not the body. The body is never free from karma, but your essential self, your witness self, the true self, that is who you are. So as we see as we go through the Gita, there is this Arjuna just keeps punching away at, well, what do you mean by this? What is that? Arjuna is every person. He's our spokesperson. He's the one who asks the questions. That if we were Krishna's friend, we might ask. Very, very pushy questions sometimes, and very demanding a very accurate answer. And Krishna always obliges. Understanding that, as Krishna himself says in the Gita, that he and Arjuna are one. There is only one. There is only that undifferentiated Brahman. Anything else then before we move on? All right, we have some time left. Go to the front of the book, Swayam, and I can't. Is there a translator's preface?
Yes, there is.
Okay, please read the translator's preface. We probably won't get much beyond that. We won't get to Aldous Huxley's introduction tonight.
So
That's just as well.
the end of the book, the Gita and War, we are going to skip, or?
Yeah, that's anybody who wants to read it and ask questions about it later. But it had to do with the fact that this was published right at after World War II, and people were saying, well, how can there have been a just war? And there's all kinds of questions answered in that, but we're not going to read that part.
Okay. So I'm going to start with the translator's preface.
Yes. Well, before you do, anything else from anyone before we move on? Anything at all about what we read about the cosmology of the Gita? What it is that we're looking at as this was a very, I mean, there's a lot there. You can read that over and over and over and still not grasp it all. Okay, please go ahead.
Nowadays, it is becoming fashionable to translate the world's great books into some form of basic English or everyday speech. The Gita does not easily lend itself to such treatment. The Sanskrit in which it is written differs radically from the modern English. It is compressed and telegraphic. It abounds in exact philosophical and religious terms. Its frame of reference is a system of cosmology unfamiliar to Western thought. And indeed, it would be hard to evolve any uniform English style, modern or ancient, in which the Gita could be satisfactorily rendered. For the Gita, regarded simply as a piece of literature, is not a unity. It has several aspects, several distinct tones of voice. Let us consider each of them in turn. First, the Gita may be regarded as part of an epic poem. It is all in verse. The first chapter is pure epic, continuing in the mood of the Mahabharata itself. The shouting of warriors, the neighing of horses, and the outlandish names of chieftains are still sounding in our ears as the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna begins. To translate this epic prologue as though it belonged to the philosophical discourse which follows would be to cut the Gita right out of its historical setting and deprive it of its vivid local color. Then again, the Gita is an exposition of Vedanta philosophy based upon a very definite picture of the universe. It is no use trying to disregard this fact for fear of alienating the Western reader. The translator who uses reassuring topical equivalents and twists meaning of the Sanskrit terms may think he is building a bridge between the two systems of thought, when actually he is reducing both of them to nonsense. We have tried to explain the cosmology of the Gita as briefly as possible in an appendix. Certain basic and much used words, such as Brahman, Atman, Prakriti, and the Gunas, have been kept in Sanskrit for the same reason. Precise English equivalents are lacking, and every book on philosophy or science must have a defined terminology. No one would write about physics and avoid using the word electron just because it does not occur in everyday speech. The Gita is also prophetic. Unlike the vision of Isaiah and the Psalms of David, it contains ecstatic mystical utterances about the nature and attributes of God. These are poetry and demand poetic expression. The diction must try to correspond to the inspiration. Ordinary pose will render them flat and boring. Finally, the Gita is gospel. Its essential message is timeless. In words which belong to no language, race, or epoch, incarnate God speaks to man, his friend. Here the translator must forget all about Vedanta philosophy and Sanskrit terms.
Now, I want to emphasize what Swayam just said. This is God Himself speaking to human beings in the embodiment of Arjuna, his friend. We are God's friend. We can build that relationship. There will be ways of talking about that as we begin the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna sometime soon. The 5 attitudes that Sri Ramakrishna talks about. But it is critically important to understand that there is absolutely no gap between ourselves and the divine, except as we insist upon it. The divine invites us always into this relationship of love and friendship. Essentially because there is no separation, there is just love and friendship, existence itself, knowledge itself, and love and friendship of Satchidananda. So this is how we come to this business of being our friend. So would you read that again before you read on, Swayam, unless there's something else from anyone? Any comment or question? All right, please go ahead, dear.
Okay. Finally, the Gita is gospel. Its essential message is timeless. In words which belong to no one language, race, or epoch, incarnate God speaks to man, his friend. Here, the translator must forget all about Vedanta philosophy and Sanskrit terms, all about India and the West, Krishna and Arjuna, past and future. He must aim at the utmost simplicity. He must aim at the utmost simplicity. That is why we have translated the Gita in a variety of styles, partly prose, partly verse. There is, of course, no justification for this experiment in the text itself. The transitions from one style to another are quite arbitrary. They can be judged from one standpoint only. Have we made the book more readable? Extremely literal translations of the Gita already exist. We have aimed rather at an interpretation. Here is one of the greatest religious documents of the world. Let us not approach it too pedantically as an archaic text which must be jealously guarded by university professors. It has something to say urgently to every one of us. We have to extract that message from the terseness of the original Sanskrit, and here the great classical commentators can help us. In making this translation, three of them have been consulted throughout: Shankara, Sridhara Swami, and Madhusudana Saraswati. Wishing to avoid bulky footnotes, we have incorporated their explanations in our English version. Sri Aurobindo Ghosh's masterly essays on the Gita have also been helpful. Nevertheless, our work is not a paraphrase. Except in a few difficult passages, it faithfully follows the original. We have allowed ourselves one small liberty. The Gita is sprinkled with epithets. Krishna is called Govinda, slayer of Madhu, Keshava, etc. Arjuna is addressed as consumer of the foe, son of Kunti, descendant of Bharata, son of Prita, and much else. We have kept a few of these in the opening chapters to create atmosphere. Later, they are mostly omitted, unless they seem effective for purely literary reasons. Their repetition is apt to grow very tiresome. In conclusion, we have to thank our friends Margaret Adams, Kiskaden, and Aldous Huxley for their help, frank criticism, and warm encouragement. The final draft of our translation owes them much, perhaps its very existence.
And that's a perfect time to stop because we've come to the end of the hour. Is there any comment or question from anyone? By the way, when the Swami was saying we here, this is not the royal we. He meant himself and Christopher Isherwood. Christopher Isherwood was very, very instrumental in creating the style and the language in which this document is expressed in English. So that's why he is credited on the cover. Not just Swami Prabhavananda, but Prabhavananda and Isherwood. And if you wish to have a narrative of their relationship in creating this, you can find one, go to American Vedantist magazine online, American Vedantist, which is accessible to you, just americanvedantist.org, and look up just search for the cooperation between Prabhavananda and Isherwood and how that came to be. So anything else from anyone?
How are you doing, Brother Shankara?
Well, dear, not so awfully well, really. There's the doctor. There's an off chance that I might have to go back to the hospital, depending on the results of the tests that were made today. Um, if my hemoglobin uh, number isn't stable, that's a possibility. Uh, anyway, I won't go into all the details. Anything that you need to know, you'll receive as an e-newsletter bulletin from Cindy if anything changes. But so far, well, I'll know much more after I see what the test results are and what my doctor has said about them. So, may you all be well in bright spirits. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we be always, and know ourselves to be always, in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. Any final thought or word from anyone? All right, dears. You'll know, you'll receive information during the week about my situation. This was quite an ordeal for the body, and for the mind. The spirit is quite at rest, at peace. The being that is expressed as Brother Shankara is fine, but the embodiment that is spoken of as Brother Shankara is been pretty compromised over the last little while. So you'll know if we have Saturday class, and for those of you who come to Arati, you'll know whether Arati continues and so on. Any final thought from anybody? All right, dears.
Take care, Brother Shankara. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, it's we need to continue. We need to keep on keeping on. I mean, that's the only reason for being here, isn't it? We are a congregation, and so
True.
may we continue to serve together in that way. Much love to you all.
Wish you well, Brother Shankara.
Thank you,
Take care.
dear.